When a mafia boss found his ex injured and alone, he made a choice that won her heart again. The metallic taste of blood filled Sophia's mouth as she stumbled deeper into the alley, her designer heels scraping against broken concrete. Her ribs screamed with every labored breath, a painful reminder of the beating she'd barely escaped. The brick walls seemed to close in, spinning as her vision blurred. She pressed her trembling hand against the rough wall, leaving a crimson smear as she tried to steady herself. Her perfectly tailored suit was torn and stained, a far cry from the composed lawyer she'd been just hours ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. 5 years of building a legitimate life, and here she was right back in the darkness she'd tried to escape. A distant shout echoed off the walls, followed by heavy footsteps. They were coming for her. Sophia's legs gave out, and she slid down the grimy wall, her body betraying her desperate need to keep running. The world tilted sideways as she crumpled onto the cold ground. "Find her!" The harsh command bounced between the buildings. "The boss wants her alive." Sophia's eyelids grew heavy. She thought she'd left this world behind. The violence, the power plays, the constant looking over her shoulder. But the past had caught up with her, dragging her back into the shadows she'd fought so hard to escape. Through the haze of semi-consciousness, new footsteps approached, measured, deliberate, familiar. The sound alone sent a chill down her spine, awakening memories she'd buried deep. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. 5 years hadn't dulled her awareness of his presence. Sophia. That voice. Deep, commanding, lined with barely contained fury. Dominic Moretti, the man who'd once owned her heart before shattering it into pieces. The beast of the underworld, feared by all who crossed his path. She forced her eyes open, visions swimming as she looked up at him. He stood like a dark angel of death, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the filthy alley. The streetlight behind him cast his face in shadow, but she could feel the intensity of his gaze burning into her. Dominic knelt beside her, his movements controlled but radiating barely contained violence. His hand, surprisingly gentle, tilted her face toward the dim light. The touch sent unwanted sparks through her battered body. Some things never changed, no matter how much time passed. Who did this? The question came out as a growl, his fingers tightening slightly on her jaw. Sophia tried to pull away, but her strength had abandoned her. "Leave me alone," she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse. "I don't need your help." His dark laugh held no humor. "Look at yourself, Sophia. You're bleeding out in my territory. You don't have a choice." The sound of approaching voices grew louder. Dominic's head snapped up, his body tensing like a predator ready to strike. Without warning, he shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The familiar scent of his cologne enveloped her, bringing with it a flood of memories she'd tried to forget. "You're coming with me," he growled, sliding one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. "No," she protested weakly, trying to push against his chest. "I can't. Not again." But Dominic ignored her resistance, lifting her with brutal care against his solid frame. "I won't let you die here." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Not when I've finally found you again." Sophia's heart pounded traitorously in her chest as he carried her toward his waiting car, her body betraying her with its instinctive response to his proximity. The past 5 years melted away in his arms, leaving her raw and vulnerable. She was powerless to resist as he pulled her back into his dark world, leaving her no choice but to follow. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The sleek black SUV pulled up to Dominic's mansion, its tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Sophia's head lolled against the leather seat, her consciousness fading in and out. Through blurred vision, she made out the looming stone facade, illuminated by carefully placed spotlights that made the building appear even more imposing in the darkness. "Stay awake," Dominic ordered, his deep voice cutting through her fog. His arms slipped under her body, lifting her with surprising gentleness that contradicted his harsh tone. Sophia wanted to fight, to push away from his chest, but her limbs felt like lead. The metallic taste of blood lingered in her mouth. "I don't need your help," she managed to whisper. "Shut up," he growled, carrying her through massive wooden doors that opened before them. His footsteps echoed across marble floors as he barked orders to his men. "Get Dr. Martinez here. Now." The mansion's interior was exactly as she remembered, all dark wood, expensive artwork, and an overwhelming sense of power. He took her to a room she didn't recognize, laying her on a bed with Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Don't move," he commanded, his face inches from hers. Those dark eyes that had haunted her dreams for 5 years searched her face, something unreadable flickering in their depths. Still giving orders, Sophia spat, finding a spark of strength in her anger. "Nothing's changed." His jaw tightened. "Everything's changed." The doctor arrived within minutes, a middle-aged man with steady hands and worried eyes. Dominic stood like a statue in the corner, arms crossed, watching every move as the doctor examined her injuries. "The cuts need stitches," Dr. Martinez announced, opening his medical bag. "And she has a mild concussion," Sophia hissed as the needle pierced her skin. Dominic took a step forward, his fists clenching, but stayed where he was. "I'm fine," she insisted, trying to sit up. "I can handle myself." "Like you handled yourself tonight?" Dominic's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Those men would have killed you. Because of your world." The words burst from her lips. "The world I left behind. The world you pushed me out of." The doctor paused in his work, glancing nervously between them. "Continue," Dominic ordered him, then fixed his gaze back on Sophia. "You never left this world, Sophia. You just pretended you did." She wanted to scream at him, to throw something, to make him feel an ounce of the pain she'd carried for 5 years. But the doctor's gentle ministrations and the blood loss left her weak, vulnerable. "There," Dr. Martinez said finally, taping the last bandage in place. "She needs rest, and someone should wake her every few hours to check on the concussion." Dominic nodded once, and the doctor quickly packed his supplies and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Sophia struggled to sit up, ignoring the way the room spun. "I'm leaving." "No." One word, filled with absolute authority. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, determination driving her forward. "You don't control me anymore, Dominic." He moved faster than she expected, crossing the room in 2 strides. His large frame blocked her path, radiating dangerous energy. "You're not going anywhere until I say so." The lock clicked into place under his hand, the sound echoing with finality in the quiet room. Sophia's heart pounded against her ribs, a caged bird sensing a predator. 5 years of carefully constructed independence crumbled as she realized she was trapped once again in Dominic Moretti's world, with all its darkness and deadly beauty. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw the same possessive gleam that had both thrilled and terrified her years ago. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Sophia sank deeper into the plush leather armchair, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the armrest. The living room hadn't changed in 5 years, still the same dark wood panels, crystal decanters, and that massive fireplace that made everything glow golden. Even the air felt the same, heavy with power and secrets. Her ribs ached with every breath, a reminder of how close she'd come to death in that alley. The doctor had wrapped her torso tight, but the bruises blooming across her skin told their own story. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the memories that flooded back. Stolen kisses in this very room, whispered promises that turned to ash, the day Dominic had looked at her with those cold eyes and told her to leave. The sound of footsteps made her spine stiffen. Dominic entered the room like he owned the air itself, each movement calculated and controlled. The crystal tumbler in his hand caught the firelight, amber liquid swirling as he approached. His presence filled the space, suffocating in its intensity. "You look better," he said, his voice rough. "The doctor says you'll heal." Sophia kept her face neutral, though her heart hammered against her bruised ribs. "I didn't ask for your help, and yet here we are." He took a slow sip of whiskey, his dark eyes never leaving her face. You owe me for saving your life. The words hit her like a slap. I owe you nothing, she spat, trying to stand despite the pain. You made it clear 5 years ago that we were done. Sit down before you hurt yourself, he ordered, and damn her body for responding to that tone, sinking back into the chair. Those men who attacked you, they're part of something bigger. You're not safe out there. I was doing fine on my own. His laugh was bitter. Is that what you call bleeding out in an alley? Fine. Better than being here with you. The words came out sharp, meant to wound. Dominic moved closer, and Sophia fought the urge to shrink back. He towered over her, all broad shoulders and contained violence. You still haven't learned, have you? This world, my world, it never really lets go. I got out, she insisted. Did you? He leaned down, bracing one hand on the armrest. His cologne wrapped around her, achingly familiar. You think being a lawyer makes you clean? Makes you safe? Sophia met his gaze, refusing to show weakness. At least I tried to build something honest, while I watched from the shadows, making sure nobody touched what was mine. The confession hung between them, heavy with implications. Sophia's breath caught. What are you talking about? You think it was coincidence that no one bothered you these past 5 years? His voice dropped lower, dangerous. That your law firm suddenly got those high-profile clients? That your stalker ex-boyfriend disappeared without a trace? Each revelation felt like another crack in her carefully constructed walls. You had no right. I had every right, he growled. You were my greatest mistake, Sophia. The words should have hurt, but something in his tone made her pause. There was pain there, raw and bleeding beneath the surface. Before she could respond, he straightened up, draining his whiskey in one smooth motion. Without another word, he turned and left the room, leaving Sophia with the crushing weight of everything unsaid. She stared at the empty doorway, her mind spinning with new questions. All this time, she'd thought she'd escaped his world, built her own life. But his shadow had been there, protecting and manipulating from afar. The realization made her angry. Yet underneath that anger lurked something more dangerous. Hope. Sophia's head snapped up as Dominic strode into the study, his presence filling the room like a gathering storm. His suit jacket was off, revealing the gun holster beneath, and his white shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. The sight of his muscled forearms made her throat dry. They're moving against us, he said without preamble, dropping a manila folder onto the mahogany desk between them. Photos spilled out, surveillance shots of men she recognized from the Rossi family, the ones who had attacked her. What do you mean, us? Sophia's voice cracked. There is no us, Dominic. Not anymore. His dark eyes fixed on her face. The moment they touched you, they made it about us. Sophia's fingers trembled as she picked up one of the photos. These men, they're Victor Rossi's crew? They've been watching you for weeks. Dominic's jaw clenched. Planning. Waiting. I don't understand. Why me? I'm nobody to them. Because you're everything to me. The words fell between them like stones in still water. They know that hurting you is the fastest way to start a war. Sophia stood up, putting distance between them. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No, you lost the right to protect me 5 years ago when you walked away. I never walked away. His voice dropped lower, dangerous. I've had eyes on you every day since then. Every single day. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. She thought of all the times she'd felt watched, all the moments she'd dismissed as paranoia. You had no right. I had every right. He moved closer, backing her against the bookshelf. You're mine, Sophia. You've always been mine. She could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. I need to leave, she whispered. You're not going anywhere. His hand planted on the shelf beside her head. The Rossis want a war? Fine. But you're staying here where I can protect you. Sophia ducked under his arm, putting the desk between them. Her mind raced, cataloging exits, possibilities. The French doors leading to the garden caught her eye. You can't keep me here against my will. Watch me. His smile was cruel, knowing. He saw right through her desperate plans. She waited until he turned to pour himself a drink, then bolted for the doors. Her fingers had barely touched the handle when his arm wrapped around her waist yanking her back against his chest. Always so predictable, Kura. His breath was hot against her ear. Did you really think I wouldn't see that coming? Sophia struggled, but his grip was iron. Let me go. Never again. He spun her to face him, one hand gripping her chin. You want to know why I pushed you away 5 years ago? Because my enemies were closing in then, too. I thought distance would keep you safe. His thumb traced her lower lip. I was wrong. So now we do this my way. And what way is that? She asked, hating how breathless she sounded. You stay here, under my protection. You don't leave these grounds without my permission and armed escort. His eyes darkened. And if you try to run again, Sophia's spine stiffened. Then what? You won't run from me again. Not without a price. His cold gaze locked onto hers, sending shivers down her spine. In that moment, staring into the eyes of the man they called the Beast, Sophia realized there was no escaping the world she'd left behind. It had found her, claimed her, and wore Dominic's face. Sophia paced the length of her gilded cage, running her fingers along the expensive wallpaper that lined Dominic's guest room. 3 days had passed since her failed escape attempt, and the isolation was starting to wear on her nerves. The only disruptions to her solitude were the maids who brought her meals and, more notably, Dominic's daily visits. She paused at the window, watching his men patrol the ground below. The security had doubled since her arrival, though she couldn't tell if it was to keep others out or to keep her in. Probably both. The door opened without warning. Only Dominic entered this way, as if knocking was beneath him. Sophia's breath caught as he filled the doorframe, his broad shoulders blocking the light from the hallway. He carried a garment bag in one hand. You need proper clothes, he said, laying the bag across her bed. The ones you arrived in are ruined. Sophia approached cautiously, unzipping the bag to reveal an elegant black dress. I don't need your charity. It's not charity. His voice was gruff, but something in his expression made her look twice. For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing a glimpse of the man she'd once known. The one who used to look at her like she was his whole world. Why are you really here, Dominic? He moved closer, and Sophia fought the urge to step back. His presence still affected her, still made her skin tingle with awareness. You need to attend a meeting with me tonight. A meeting? She laughed bitterly. So, I'm what? Your prop now? You're my protection. His admission surprised her. Your presence will prevent certain conversations from taking place. Sophia studied him, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers flexed at his sides. She'd learned to read these subtle signs years ago. You're worried about something. His eyes met hers, and the intensity there made her stomach flip. I'm always worried where you're concerned, Sophia. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Sophia turned away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. Fine, I'll go to your meeting. Good. He moved toward the door, but paused. And Sophia? Don't try anything stupid. She whirled around, anger flaring. Like what? Running away again? We both know how well that worked out. Instead of responding with his usual cold dismissal, Dominic's expression softened for a fraction of a second. I can't protect you if you keep fighting me. The words struck her like a physical blow. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with the designer dress and too many confused thoughts. Hours later, Sophia stood before the mirror, smoothing down the black silk that hugged her curves. The dress was perfect, of course it was. Dominic had always known exactly what suited her. The thought brought a fresh wave of anger and something else she didn't want to name. A knock at the door announced one of Dominic's men, Marco, who would escort her to the meeting. Sophia took one last look in the mirror, squared her shoulders, and followed him through the mansion's winding corridors. The closer they got to their destination, the more her instincts screamed danger. She could feel it in the air, thick and oppressive, like the calm before a storm. Marco's hand rested on his concealed weapon as they approached a heavy wooden door, and Sophia's heart began to race. This wasn't just any meeting. Something about Dominic's behavior, the way he'd looked at her earlier, it all pointed to something bigger, something dangerous enough to make even the Beast himself uneasy. Marco opened the door, and Sophia took a deep breath before stepping inside. knowing she was walking straight into the lion's den. The meeting room felt like a tomb. Sophia's heels clicked against marble floors as Dominic's man escorted her inside the dimly lit space. Crystal chandeliers cast shadows across the faces of 5 men seated around a massive mahogany table. Their expressions were masks of practiced indifference, but their eyes followed her every move. Dominic sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding attention. He didn't acknowledge Sophia as she took her seat beside him, but she felt the slight tensing of his body at her proximity. "Let's make this quick," Dominic's voice cut through the silence. "The Castellano family has been making moves in my territory. That ends today." Marco Castellano, a man with silver-streaked hair and cold eyes, leaned forward. "Your territory?" His accent was thick with mockery. "Times are changing, beast. The old ways don't work anymore." Sophia watched Dominic's jaw tighten. His fingers drummed once on the table, a signal she remembered from their past. In an instant, 2 of his men materialized behind Castellano. "The old ways seem to work just fine," Dominic said softly. The kind of softness that preceded violence. "Your son's attack on what's mine," his eyes flickered to Sophia for a fraction of a second, "was a declaration of war." Castellano's face reddened. "You dare threaten me?" "In my own." The words died in his throat as Dominic's hand shot across the table, grabbing Castellano's tie and yanking him forward. The other men reached for their weapons, but Dominic's guards already had their guns trained on them. "Your son touched what belongs to me." Dominic's voice was ice. "Did you really think I wouldn't respond?" Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd forgotten this side of him, the calculated violence, the absolute control. Her hands trembled in her lap. "Your boy is alive," Dominic continued, "but he'll never walk again. Consider it mercy." He released Castellano's tie, smoothing his own jacket as if nothing had happened. "Now, about those shipments you've been intercepting." The meeting continued like a perfectly choreographed dance of power and submission. Dominic systematically dismantled every argument, every attempt at resistance. When someone suggested an alternative arrangement, Dominic simply nodded to one of his men, who dropped a phone on the table. A video played, evidence of betrayal, of double-dealing. The color drained from faces around the table. Sophia watched it all with a mixture of horror and fascination. This was the man she'd tried to forget, the one whose darkness had both attracted and terrified her. He wielded power like a surgeon's scalpel, precise, measured, lethal. The meeting ended with signatures and handshakes that felt more like surrender than agreement. As the men filed out, Sophia caught sight of Castellano's face, defeat and fury warring in his expression. In the elevator down to the parking garage, Sophia stood beside Dominic, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. His cologne filled the small space, bringing back memories she'd tried to bury. They slid into the back of his Mercedes, the privacy partition rising automatically. Sophia stared at his profile, at the man who could destroy lives with a single word, yet still looked at her with that hint of softness she remembered. The question burned in her throat until she couldn't hold it back anymore. "How many lives have you ruined for your empire?" Dominic turned to her, his eyes dark and unflinching. "As many as it takes." The brutal honesty of his answer hung between them. Sophia found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn to the dangerous magnetism she'd never quite escaped. The monster before her was the same man who used to hold her like she was precious, who'd once whispered promises against her skin. The realization terrified her more than his violence ever could. The mansion study felt suffocating as Sophia watched Dominic pace behind his mahogany desk. His fingers drummed against the polished wood, a rare display of agitation from a man who usually maintained perfect control. The evening light cast long shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw and the darkness in his eyes. "You shouldn't have seen that today," he said finally, his voice low and controlled. The meeting wasn't meant to turn violent. Sophia stood her ground, arms crossed. "But it did. And you didn't hesitate." "I never hesitate." His words carried a weight that made her shiver. "That's how I've survived this long." Before Sophia could respond, Rapid footsteps approached the study. Marco, Dominic's most trusted lieutenant, burst through the door, his face pale. "Boss, we've got a problem. Someone leaked information about the shipment. The Rossis are moving in." Dominic's expression hardened instantly. Who had access to that information? "Only the inner circle," Marco replied, his eyes darting briefly to Sophia. "Get everyone in the meeting room. Now." Dominic's voice carried that deadly calm that Sophia remembered all too well. He turned to her. "You're coming too." Sophia wanted to refuse, but the steel in his gaze left no room for argument. Minutes later, they stood in a room with Dominic's top men. The tension was palpable, thick enough to choke on. Dominic moved like a predator, studying each face carefully. "Someone in this room betrayed me," he announced, his words falling like ice. "And they're going to confess right now." Sophia watched as fear rippled through the group. She recognized these men. They'd been at countless business dinners, social gatherings, always hovering in Dominic's orbit. Now, they looked like cornered animals. The silence stretched until one man, Anthony, shifted slightly. It was barely noticeable, but Dominic caught it. In a flash, he had Anthony pinned against the wall, forearm pressed against his throat. "Talk," Dominic growled. Anthony's eyes bulged. "The Rossis, they offer protection for my family." Sophia's heart hammered as she watched Dominic's face transform. Gone was any trace of the man who'd shown her glimpses of tenderness. This was the beast, the monster who'd earned his reputation through blood and violence. "Your family," Dominic's laugh was cruel. "I protected your family. I gave them everything." His grip tightened. "And this is how you repay me?" Sophia felt her breath coming in short gasps. The room seemed to spin as memories flooded back. Memories of why she'd left this world, why she'd run from Dominic in the first place. The violence, the constant threat of death, the way it changed people. "Please," Anthony choked out. "I'll make it right." "Yes," Dominic said softly, dangerously. "You will." Sophia couldn't watch anymore. She turned away, but Dominic's voice stopped her. "Look, Sophia, this is who I am. This is my world." She forced herself to meet his gaze, finding those dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. In them, she saw everything, the violence and the tenderness, the monster in the man. Her heart raced with the realization that despite everything, she still wanted him, still craved him, still loved him. Dominic must have read something in her expression because his next words were softer, meant only for her. "If you want out, you can walk away. But you're mine as long as you stay." Sophia paced the length of Dominic's study, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the room. She could feel his eyes on her, tracking her movement like a predator studying its prey. "Would you stop that?" Dominic's voice cut through the silence, deep and commanding. He sat behind his massive desk, papers scattered before him, but his attention was fixed solely on her. "Stop what?" Sophia crossed her arms, refusing to meet his gaze. "I'm just walking. You're trying to wear a hole in my floor." He set down his pen with deliberate slowness. "Sit down. I don't take orders from you anymore, Dominic." The words came out sharp, but they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Not while she was essentially his prisoner, no matter how gilded the cage. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Sophia's breath caught as he approached, his presence filling the room. He moved with the grace of a dangerous man, someone used to commanding fear and respect. 5 years, he said quietly, stopping just inches from her. 5 years, and you're still as stubborn as ever. The scent of his cologne wrapped around her, familiar and intoxicating. Sophia forced herself to stay still, even as her body yearned to lean into him. "And you're still trying to control everything." His hand reached out, fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent electricity through her skin. "Only the things that matter." Sophia jerked away, but found herself backed against his desk. Don't what?" His voice dropped lower, sending shivers down her spine. "Don't care? Don't protect you? Don't remember how it used to be between us? You lost the right to care when you walked away." The words came out breathless, betraying her body's reaction to his proximity. Dominic's eyes darkened. I never walked away. I did what was necessary. Necessary? Sophia laughed bitterly. You broke my heart and called it necessary. His hands gripped the desk on either side of her, caging her in. Everything I do is calculated, Sophia. Every move, every decision. His face drew closer. Except when it comes to you. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, see the muscle in his jaw ticking with tension. That's not good enough anymore. No. His eyes dropped to her lips. Then why is your heart racing? Sophia pressed her palms against his chest, meaning to push him away. Instead, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Stop playing games. This was never a game. His voice was rough with emotion. You were never a game. The tension between them crackled like lightning before a storm. Sophia knew she should move, should put distance between them, but her body refused to obey. Every breath brought his scent closer. Every slight movement reminded her of how perfectly they once fit together. I hate you, she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. No. Dominic's hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing her bottom lip. You hate that you still want me. Sophia's eyes fluttered shut at his touch. Dominic, the warning in her voice was lost as his lips crashed into hers. The kiss was brutal and tender all at once. 5 years of suppressed passion exploding between them. His hand tangled in her hair while the other pulled her closer, eliminating any space between their bodies. Sophia responded with equal fervor, her fingers gripping his shoulders as she arched into him. The kiss deepened, tasting of whiskey and dangerous promises. All the anger, all the hurt, all the longing poured into that single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Dominic's eyes were dark with desire, his usual control shattered. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs, her lips tingling from the intensity of the kiss. Fear and want warred inside her as she realized how easily she'd fallen back into his orbit, how naturally their bodies still responded to each other. Sophia pushed the food around her plate, the silence in Dominic's lavish dining room becoming unbearable. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across his face as he sat at the head of the long mahogany table. She'd noticed something different about him tonight, a weariness in his eyes that she'd never seen before. Why did you really push me away? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question had burned inside her for 5 years. Dominic's jaw tightened. He set down his wine glass with careful precision, the red liquid trembling slightly. Sophia, his voice held a warning. No, she pressed, finding courage she didn't know she had. I deserve to know. After everything, after what happened between us, I deserve the truth. The tension in the room thickened. Dominic's eyes, usually cold and calculating, flickered with something raw. His fingers clenched around his knife, knuckles white with strain. My father, he finally said, the words coming out like they physically hurt him, was a monster who wore a designer suit. Sophia remained silent, afraid any interruption would make him retreat behind his walls again. He believed weakness deserved punishment. Dominic's voice turned hollow. Love was weakness. Mercy was weakness. Everything that made you human, that was weakness too. He laughed, but the sound held no humor. The first time I showed compassion to someone, he made me watch as he destroyed them. Said it was my fault for being weak. Sophia's heart clenched. She remembered the bruises she'd sometimes glimpsed on young Dominic, the way he'd flinch at sudden movements. It all made terrible sense now. The day I realized I loved you, he continued, his voice dropping lower. I saw his face in the mirror. I became everything I hated about him. Controlling, possessive, dangerous. I couldn't. He swallowed hard. I couldn't do that to you. Dominic, Sophia whispered, reaching across the table. Her fingers brushed his hand. He didn't pull away. You're not him. You never were. His eyes met hers, filled with a vulnerability that made her breath catch. Aren't I? Look at what I've done. The people I've hurt. The lives I've taken. You protected people. You protected me. Sophia's voice grew stronger. Your father hurt people because he enjoyed it. You do it to survive, to keep others safe. There's a difference. Something in Dominic's expression cracked. The mask he wore slipped, revealing the wounded man beneath. How can you look at me like that? After everything? Because I see you, she said simply. Not the beast everyone fears. Not the monster you think you are. Just you, Dominic. He stared at her, stunned by her words. The silence between them felt different now, charged with understanding rather than tension. Sophia could see the battle in his eyes, the way her acceptance both terrified and drew him in. You make me weak, he muttered, but his fingers intertwined with hers. No, Sophia corrected gently. I make you human. For a moment, just a moment, Dominic's guard completely dropped. The pain, the fear, the longing, it all showed on his face. Then, like a cloud passing over the sun, his expression hardened again. But something had changed. The walls had cracked, and Sophia knew they could never be fully rebuilt. Dominic stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. It's late, he said, his voice rough. You should rest. Sophia nodded, knowing she'd pushed him as far as he could go tonight. As she rose to leave, she felt his eyes following her, heavy with unspoken words. Later that night, she drifted off to sleep, unaware of the dark figure standing in her doorway. Dominic watched her, his expression torn between desire and fear. Her words had shaken him more than he cared to admit. You're my weakness, he whispered to himself, before forcing his emotions back into the dark. The evening air crackled with tension as gunshots shattered the peaceful facade of Dominic's estate. Sophia jolted awake in her bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sounds of chaos erupted from downstairs, shouting, breaking glass, more gunfire. Her door burst open. Dominic stood there, his white dress shirt spotted with blood. Get up, now. His voice was ice cold, leaving no room for argument. Sophia scrambled out of bed, still wearing the silk nightgown he'd provided. Before she could grab anything else, Dominic seized her arm and pulled her close. Stay behind me. Don't make a sound. They moved through the darkened hallway, Dominic's gun steady in his free hand. The mansion she'd grown somewhat comfortable in over the past weeks had transformed into a war zone. A body lay crumpled at the bottom of the grand staircase, one of Dominic's guards. Boss, a voice called out. They've breached the west wing. Dominic's grip on Sophia tightened. Marco, he growled, get her to the panic room. A burly man materialized from the shadows, reaching for Sophia, but before he could touch her, 3 men in black tactical gear burst through the nearby window. Glass exploded inward, and Sophia screamed. What happened next would be forever burned into her memory. Dominic moved like a demon unleashed. His first shot caught the leading attacker in the throat, blood spraying across the expensive wallpaper. Without hesitation, he charged the second man, using his massive frame to slam him into the wall. The sickening crack of bones breaking mixed with a gurgled scream. The third attacker raised his weapon, but Dominic was faster. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting until the gun clattered to the floor. Sophia watched in horror as Dominic drove his knee into the man's stomach, then grabbed his head and slammed it repeatedly against the marble floor. Who sent you? Dominic's voice was terrifyingly calm as he pressed his foot against the man's throat. The attacker spat blood. Go to hell, Moretti. You first. Dominic pulled the trigger. Sophia felt her knees give way, but Marco caught her before she fell. More of Dominic's men flooded the hallway, reporting that the property was secure. Throughout it all, Sophia couldn't tear her eyes away from Dominic, the man she'd been slowly letting back in her heart, who now stood amid carnage of his own making. His eyes, when they met hers, were completely empty. No warmth, no humanity, just endless darkness. Blood had splattered across his face, and he made no move to wipe it away. Get her downstairs, he ordered Marco. I need to clean this up. Dominic, Sophia whispered, but he'd already turned away, barking orders at his men about disposing of bodies and checking the perimeter. Marco led her to a reinforced room in the basement, where she sat trembling for what felt like hours. The adrenaline slowly faded, leaving her nauseous and cold. She'd known what Dominic was capable of, had always known, but seeing it firsthand was different. The casual way he'd ended lives, the complete lack of hesitation or remorse. When he finally came for her, he'd changed his clothes and washed away the blood. But Sophia could still see it, could still hear the sounds of violence echoing in her mind. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice oddly gentle. Sophia stood on shaky legs, keeping her distance. "This isn't who I thought you were," she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. Dominic's face hardened, all trace of gentleness vanishing. "This is who I am," he warned her, his eyes going cold again. "Don't ever forget it." The morning sun filtered through the bulletproof windows of Dominic's study, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where maps and documents lay scattered. Sophia stood by the window, her arms crossed, watching as more of Dominic's men patrolled the grounds. The attack yesterday had changed everything. "They're getting bolder." Dominic's voice came from behind her, rough with exhaustion. He hadn't slept, spending the night coordinating with his captains and strengthening security. Sophia turned to face him, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his jaw. "Why now? What changed?" Dominic's laugh was bitter as he poured himself a drink. "What changed is that they know you're here. With me." He took a long sip, his knuckles white against the crystal glass. "My enemies think they've found my weakness." "I'm not your weakness," Sophia snapped, but her voice wavered. "No." He set the glass down with deliberate care. "You're much more dangerous than that." Moving to his desk, Dominic spread out several photographs. Sophia's breath caught as she recognized faces, prominent family members, trusted allies, all connected by red lines drawn in Dominic's precise hand. "My father's death wasn't an accident," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It was orchestrated by people I considered family. People who are now trying to destroy everything I've built." Sophia stepped closer, studying the web of betrayal laid out before her. Her legal training kicked in, analyzing connections and motivations. "Your Uncle Antonio," she murmured, touching one photo. "He's behind this?" "Along with the Rossi family." Dominic's hands clenched into fists. "They've been planning this for years. My father's murder was just the beginning. That's why you pushed me away 5 years ago," Sophia realized, the pieces finally falling into place. "You knew they were watching you, waiting for an opportunity." Pain flashed across Dominic's face before his expression hardened again. "I couldn't protect you then. I wasn't strong enough. And now I'm the monster they created." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "But I need more than just power to beat them. I need someone who can think like them, anticipate their moves." Sophia felt the weight of his words settle over her. "You want me to help you? You understand both worlds, the legal and the criminal. You see patterns others miss." His fingers brushed her arm, the touch sending electricity through her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to survive." She stepped away, needing distance to think clearly. The lawyer in her knew she should run, should call the FBI, and end this war before it claimed more lives. But the part of her that still loved him, that understood the darkness in his world, knew there was no walking away. "If I help you," she said carefully, "I need to know everything. No more secrets." Dominic nodded slowly. "They'll come for you harder than ever. You'll have to embrace this life completely." "I know." Sophia moved back to the desk, studying the photographs with new purpose. "Tell me about Antonio's connection to the Rossi family. When did it start?" As Dominic began explaining the complex web of alliances and betrayals, Sophia felt herself sliding deeper into his world. Each revelation was another step away from the life she'd built, from the person she'd tried to become. But watching Dominic's face as he trusted her with his darkest secrets, she knew she'd already made her choice. The sun climbed higher in the sky as they worked, piecing together the conspiracy that had shaped both their lives. Sophia's legal pad filled with notes, her mind racing with strategies and contingencies. She was becoming what she'd always feared, a true part of this dangerous world. "We'll need to move quickly," she said, circling a name on her notes. "Before they realize I'm not just your weakness anymore." Sophia's heels clicked against the marble floor of the upscale restaurant as she walked beside Dominic. His hand rested possessively on her lower back, guiding her through the dimly lit space. The touch sent shivers down her spine, a mixture of fear and something else she didn't want to acknowledge. Remember, Dominic's voice was low, meant only for her ears. Let me do the talking. These men aren't like your lawyer friends. She shot him a sharp look. I know how to handle myself. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. That's what worries me. The private dining room was already occupied when they entered. 3 men sat at a long table, their expressions hard and calculating. Sophia recognized Vincent Caruso, one of the most influential crime bosses in the city. His silver hair and expensive suit couldn't hide the predatory gleam in his eyes. Dominic's grip on Sophia tightened as they took their seats. The air felt thick with unspoken threats and barely concealed violence. Dominic. Vincent's voice was smooth as silk, and the lovely Miss Leone. What a pleasant surprise. Sophia felt Dominic tense beside her. The way Vincent's eyes lingered on her made her skin crawl. Let's skip the pleasantries. Dominic's tone was ice cold. We both know why we're here. Vincent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, the territory dispute in the harbor. He paused, swirling his wine glass. I'm willing to make a deal. The negotiation unfolded like a deadly chess match. Sophia watched as Dominic maneuvered through the conversation with calculated precision. His words were carefully chosen, each response measured. She could see why they called him the Beast. There was something terrifying in his controlled power. In exchange for the dock access, Vincent continued, I want something personal. His gaze shifted to Sophia. Your lawyer. I could use someone with her expertise. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dominic's hand found Sophia's knee under the table, his grip painful. She's not part of any deal. Dominic's voice was deadly quiet. Touch her, and I'll burn everything you own to the ground. Vincent's smile widened. So the rumors are true. The Beast has a weakness after all. Sophia felt her heart hammering in her chest. The tension between the 2 men was suffocating. She could see Dominic's other hand sliding beneath his jacket, where she knew he kept his gun. The deal stands as discussed, Dominic stated flatly. The dock's for the protection of your casino operations. Nothing more. A long moment passed as Vincent studied them both. Finally, he nodded. Very well. But remember, Dominic, showing weakness in our world is dangerous. The meeting concluded with handshakes and thinly veiled threats. Sophia felt like she could finally breathe again when they left the restaurant. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. Before she could process what happened, Dominic grabbed her arm and pulled her into a shadowed alcove. His body pressed her against the wall, his presence overwhelming her senses. His eyes were dark, filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. You belong to me now, he murmured, his voice rough with possession. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her bottom lip. Whether you accept it or not. Sophia's pulse quickened, heat flooding her body despite her attempts to resist it. The way he looked at her, like she was something precious and dangerous all at once, made her weak in the knees. She could feel his breath against her skin, the solid warmth of his body caging her in. In that moment, the line between fear and desire blurred completely. The morning started like any other at Dominic's mansion, with Sophia reviewing legal documents in his study. The heavy curtains filtered the sunlight, casting shadows across the antique desk where she sat. Her fingers traced the edge of a particularly concerning contract when Marco, Dominic's most trusted lieutenant, entered the room. Ms. Leone, there's an urgent matter that requires your attention in the garage, Marco said, his usually warm smile seeming strained. Sophia hesitated. Something felt off. I should wait for Dominic. The boss is handling another situation. He asked me to escort you personally. She stood slowly, her instincts screaming danger. But Marco had been by Dominic's side for years. If she couldn't trust him, who could she trust? The garage was eerily quiet when they arrived. Before Sophia could react, rough hands grabbed her from behind. She fought back, landing a solid kick to one attacker's shin, but there were too many of them. "I'm sorry, Sophia," Marco said, his facade crumbling. "But business is business." The betrayal stung worse than the zip ties cutting into her wrists. "He trusted you," she spat. "That was his mistake." Marco's phone rang, and he answered it with a smirk. "Yes, we have her. Of course. Boss will know soon enough." They bundled her into the trunk of a car, the space cramped and dark. Sophia's heart pounded as she thought of Dominic. Would he come for her? After everything they'd been through, would he risk it all? Hours passed in the darkness of what seemed to be an abandoned warehouse. Sophia's captors kept her tied to a chair, their hushed conversations echoing off concrete walls. Her mind raced with memories of Dominic, his touch, his rare moments of tenderness, the way his eyes softened when they were alone. When the first blow came, it wasn't entirely unexpected. These men wanted to send a message to Dominic, and she was just a means to an end. The pain exploded across her cheek, but she refused to cry out. "Your boyfriend's empire is about to crumble," one of them sneered. "And you get to watch." Through split lips, Sophia managed a laugh. "You clearly don't know him very well." The warehouse door burst open with a thunderous crash. Gunfire erupted, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Through the chaos, she heard his voice, that familiar, terrifying roar that meant death was coming. Dominic moved like a force of nature, each shot precise, each movement calculated. His men swarmed the warehouse, but he led the charge himself, his eyes wild with rage when they found her. The zip ties fell away under his knife, and his hands, usually so controlled, trembled as they checked her injuries. "Sophia," he breathed, his voice raw. When he saw her split lip, the bruises forming on her face, something in him changed. Marco was dragged in, struggling between two of Dominic's loyal men. The warehouse fell silent. "You broke my trust," Dominic said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Worse, you touched what's mine." Sophia watched as Dominic's mask of control slipped completely. His eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of fury and something deeper. Fear, perhaps, of how close he'd come to losing her. "They will regret ever touching you," he promised, his words carrying the weight of an oath. The darkness in his eyes promised retribution, promised pain, promised a reckoning that would shake the underworld to its core. Sophia realized then that she'd crossed a point of no return. This man, this dangerous, violent, passionate man, had claimed her completely. And despite everything, the violence, the danger, the darkness of his world, she knew she was his. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, it felt like coming home. The evening air felt heavy with tension as Sophia stood in Dominic's study, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. The bruises from her recent ordeal still painted her skin in various shades of purple and blue. Her reflection in the window showed a woman she barely recognized anymore. Someone caught between two worlds, neither fully in nor out of the darkness that surrounded Dominic Moretti. "I can't keep doing this," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. She turned to face him, finding his dark eyes already fixed on her. "The blood, the violence. I saw what you did to Marco." Dominic remained seated behind his mahogany desk, his jaw clenched. The lamp cast shadows across his face, making him look more dangerous than ever. "Marco betrayed us. He deserved worse than what he got." "Us?" Sophia's laugh was bitter. "There is no us, Dominic. You dragged me back into this life. I didn't choose it." He rose slowly, his movements predatory as he circled the desk. "You've always been part of this life, Sophia. Running away didn't change that. It only put you in more danger." Sophia backed away as he approached, but her legs hit the bookshelf behind her. "I was safe before. I had built something for myself." "Safe?" Dominic's voice dropped dangerously low. He placed his hands on either side of her head, caging her in. "Is that what you call being attacked in that alley? Being left for dead?" The heat from his body surrounded her, and Sophia fought against the familiar pull she felt whenever he was this close. "That wouldn't have happened if you hadn't." "If I hadn't what?" His eyes flickered with anger. "Protected you? Kept you alive? If you hadn't pushed me away 5 years ago." The words burst from her like a dam breaking. If you hadn't decided that your power was more important than what we had. Something flashed across Dominic's face. Pain, regret, she couldn't be sure. His hand moved to cup her cheek, and despite herself, Sophia leaned into his touch. Everything I've done, he said, his thumb tracing her bottom lip. Every life I've taken, every deal I've made, it's all been to protect what's mine. And you, Sophia, you've always been mine. Her heart thundered in her chest. You can't just claim people, Dominic. It doesn't work that way. It does in my world. His other hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer. And like it or not, this is your world too. It's in your blood, just like it's in mine. Sophia placed her hands against his chest, meaning to push him away, but instead found herself clutching his shirt. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Not of you, of what being with you means. Of what I become when I'm around you. Dominic's expression softened slightly, showing a glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with years ago. You become stronger. You become who you were always meant to be. A monster, she whispered. A queen, he corrected, his grip tightening possessively. My queen. Before Sophia could respond, Dominic's mouth crashed down on hers. The kiss was desperate, hungry, filled with years of longing and unspoken words. His hands tangled in her hair as he pressed her harder against the bookshelf. Sophia responded with equal fervor, all her resistance crumbling under the weight of her desire for him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "You're mine, Sophia. Forever," he declared, his voice rough with emotion. Sophia trembled in his arms, knowing she should fight him, but the pull between them was undeniable. Despite everything she'd witnessed, despite the darkness that surrounded him, she couldn't deny the truth of his words or the way her heart responded to his touch. The morning sun filtered through the mansion's bulletproof windows, casting long shadows across Sophia's face as she stood in Dominic's study. Her fingers traced the edge of his mahogany desk, her mind wandering to the events of the past few days. The war had escalated, and with it, the body count had risen. Yet here she was, safe in the eye of the storm, protected by the very man she'd once run from. "You shouldn't be in here alone." Dominic's deep voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, his presence commanding as always, but there was something different in his eyes when he looked at her now, a softness that hadn't been there before. "I was looking for you," Sophia said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Your men said there was another attack last night." Dominic crossed the room in long strides, closing the distance between them. His hand reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gentle gesture contrasted sharply with the blood she knew had stained those same hands hours ago. "You don't need to concern yourself with business matters," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. But Sophia wasn't backing down. "3 families are trying to take your territory. Your enemies are closing in. How can I not be concerned when I'm right in the middle of it?" His jaw clenched. "I told you I'd protect you. By killing everyone who comes near me." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Last week, I watched you execute a man who merely looked at me wrong. The week before that, you tortured someone for hours because they mentioned my name." Dominic's eyes darkened. "They needed to learn that you're off limits." Sophia stepped closer to him, close enough to smell his expensive cologne mixed with the faint scent of gunpowder. "And what about me? What am I learning from all this violence?" Instead of answering, he pulled her against his chest, his lips finding hers in a searing kiss that made her knees weak. She melted into him, hating herself for how easily he could make her forget everything else. His hands tangled in her hair, possessive and tender all at once. When they finally broke apart, Sophia's breath came in short gasps. "This doesn't solve anything," she whispered. "It solves everything," he growled, his forehead resting against hers. "You're mine, Sophia. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." She pushed away from him, needing space to think clearly. "That's what scares me, Dominic. The way you say that, like I'm just another piece of property you need to protect. You know you're more than that." His voice was rough with emotion. "Do I?" She wrapped her arms around herself. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in your world. The violence, the power plays, the constant threat of death. It's consuming everything I am. Dominic's expression softened marginally. You're stronger than you think. I've watched you adapt, seen how naturally you fit into this life. That's what terrifies me, Sophia admitted. The way I'm starting to understand your choices, even justify them. The way my heart races when you walk into a room, even knowing what you're capable of. The way I... She stopped herself, the words catching in her throat. He stepped closer again, his presence overwhelming. The way you what? Sophia closed her eyes, feeling tears threatening to spill. The way I can't imagine being anywhere else but here with you, despite everything. The way I want you, need you, even when I know I shouldn't. His hands cupped her face, thumbs wiping away the tears that had escaped. Then stop fighting it, he murmured, his lips ghosting over her temple. Stop running from what we both know is inevitable. Sophia leaned into his touch, her resistance crumbling like it always did when he held her like this. The war outside might be raging, but in this moment, in his arms, she felt an impossible peace. Sophia stood at the window of Dominic's study, watching his men prepare for war outside. The mansion grounds buzzed with activity as heavily armed guards took their positions. Her stomach twisted with a mixture of dread and acceptance. This was his world, their world now. Dominic's reflection appeared in the window behind her. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice low and controlled. I can have you taken somewhere safe. She turned to face him, taking in his dangerous presence. He wore all black, his suit perfectly tailored to hide the weapons she knew were beneath. His eyes, usually cold, held a hint of concern that made her heart ache. I'm not leaving, Sophia said firmly, though her hands trembled. I've made my choice. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his fingers gripping her chin. You don't know what you're choosing, Sophia. What's about to happen? He paused, jaw clenching. It won't be pretty. I know exactly what I'm choosing, she whispered, placing her hand over his heart. Through his shirt, she felt its steady beat, so at odds with the chaos around them. I'm choosing you. All of you. The man and the monster. Something dark and possessive flashed in his eyes. He pulled her closer, his grip almost painful. There's no going back after this. Once you see what I'm capable of. I've already seen what you're capable of, Sophia interrupted. I've seen you kill. I've seen you torture. I've seen the beast they all fear. She took a shaky breath. But I've also seen how you look at me when you think I'm sleeping. How your hands shake after you've had to hurt someone. How you try to protect me, even from yourself. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Sophia, I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you, but of losing you. Of watching you walk out that door and never coming back. His expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. No one's taking me from you, he growled. I'm going to end this tonight. All of it. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they watched as several black SUVs approached the gates. Dominic's men moved into position, weapons ready. They're here, he said, his voice turning to ice. The transformation was immediate. The man who had held her so tenderly moments ago disappeared behind the mask of the beast. Sophia grabbed his arm before he could turn away. Promise me something. He waited, his body coiled with tension. Promise me you'll come back to me, she whispered. Not just the beast. You. All of you. For a moment, the mask cracked. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a desperation that took her breath away. When he pulled back, his eyes burned with an intensity that made her shiver. I promise, he said roughly. But you need to promise me something too. His thumb traced her bottom lip. Promise me you won't look away. Not even when it gets ugly. I need you to see all of me, Sophia. The blood, the violence, everything. Because that's what you're choosing. She nodded, her throat tight. I promise. The sound of gunfire erupted outside. Dominic's phone buzzed with messages from his captains. The time had come. He stepped back, transforming fully into the dangerous man his enemies feared. Stay close to Marco, he ordered, referring to his most trusted guard. If anything happens to me... Don't, she cut him off. Just come back to me. He gave her one last look, filled with everything they hadn't said, everything they might never get to say. Then he was gone, striding out of the study toward the coming battle. Sophia watched him go, her heart pounding. She moved to the window, knowing she had to witness what was about to unfold. This was the price of loving Dominic Moretti, watching the man she loved embrace the darkness that made him who he was. Outside, the night erupted into chaos as the final battle began. The warehouse erupted in gunfire, bullets piercing through metal and concrete. Sophia pressed herself against a steel column, her heart hammering against her ribs. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled her lungs as screams and shouts echoed through the vast space. Dominic moved like a shadow through the chaos, his movements precise and lethal. She watched, unable to look away, as he dispatched his enemies one by one. There was no hesitation in his actions, no mercy in his eyes. This was the beast they all feared, the monster that lurked beneath his carefully controlled exterior. "You think you can betray me?" His voice boomed across the warehouse as he grabbed one of his former lieutenants by the throat. "You think you could take what's mine?" The man struggled, his feet dangling above the ground. "Please, I can explain." Sophia's breath caught in her throat as Dominic's grip tightened. She saw the exact moment when something shifted in his eyes, a darkness that consumed whatever humanity remained. With one swift motion, he snapped the man's neck. The body dropped to the floor with a dull thud that seemed to echo in Sophia's ears. She felt bile rising in her throat, her hands trembling as she witnessed the brutal efficiency with which Dominic eliminated his enemies. More of his men poured into the warehouse, securing the area and dealing with the remaining threats. But Sophia couldn't focus on them. Her eyes were fixed on Dominic as he stalked through the carnage, his expensive suit splattered with blood, his face a mask of cold fury. "Check every corner," he ordered, his voice carrying that dangerous edge that made his men scramble to obey. "I want everyone who betrayed us found and dealt with." When his eyes met hers across the warehouse floor, Sophia felt something inside her crack. This wasn't the man who had held her tenderly just hours ago, who had whispered promises against her skin. This was someone else entirely, someone who killed without remorse, who commanded fear and respect through violence. "Sophia." He approached her, his steps measured and deliberate. Blood dripped from his knuckles, leaving a trail of crimson drops on the concrete floor. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to form words. The contrast between his gentle tone and his blood-soaked appearance made her head spin. How could he switch so easily between tenderness and brutality? "Look at me," he demanded, reaching for her face with his clean hand. Sophia flinched involuntarily, and something dark flickered across his features. The movement was slight, but he caught it. Of course he did. Dominic never missed anything. "This is who I am, Sophia," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is what it takes to protect what's mine. To protect you." She tried to step back, to put some distance between them, but her back hit the column. "I never asked for this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted anyone to die because of me. They died because they betrayed me." He corrected her, moving closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Because they thought they could take you from me. I told you before, you're mine, and I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice made her shiver. She could feel herself pulling away emotionally, trying to protect herself from the violence and darkness that surrounded him. But even as she tried to retreat into herself, his presence demanded her attention, commanded her response. "Don't," he growled, noticing her withdrawal. His hand came up to cup her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Don't you dare pull away from me now. Not after everything." His fingers were gentle against her skin, but his eyes burned with an intensity that scared her. She saw the violence there, the capacity for cruelty, but also something else, a desperate need that matched the possessiveness in his voice. Blood and gunpowder clung to him like a second skin as he pressed closer, trapping her against the column. Around them, his men continued their sweep of the warehouse, but Sophia barely noticed them. All she could see was Dominic. All she could feel was the heat of his body and the weight of his gaze. The metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the warehouse air. Sophia stood frozen, her designer heels sticky against the concrete floor, watching as Dominic methodically wiped his knife clean. Bodies lay scattered around them, the result of his ruthless efficiency. Her stomach churned, but she couldn't look away. Dominic's shoulders were tense, his movements precise and controlled even after the chaos. He hadn't spoken since the last shot rang out. The silence between them felt suffocating, filled with unspoken truths about who he was, who they both were now. "Is this what you wanted me to see?" Sophia's voice cracked. "The monster everyone warned me about?" Dominic turned slowly, his dark eyes finding hers across the room. Blood spattered his expensive suit, but his face remained eerily calm. "This is who I've always been, Sophia. You knew that." She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting a shiver. "I knew, but seeing it," the words died in her throat as he stepped closer. "You're afraid." It wasn't a question. "Not of you," she whispered, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Of what this means for us." His jaw clenched. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face, so quick she almost missed it. Then he was moving, closing the distance between them with deliberate steps. Sophia held her ground, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Look at me," he demanded softly. When she met his gaze, she saw past the hardened exterior to the man beneath, the one who'd held her through nightmares, who'd shown her tenderness when no one was watching. "Everything I've done, every life I've taken, was to protect what's mine. To protect you. I never asked for that burden," she said. "It's not a burden." His hand came up to cup her cheek, and despite everything, she leaned into his touch. "It's who I am. The violence, the control, it's all part of keeping you safe. I won't apologize for it." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. How can something so wrong feel so right? Dominic's thumb brushed away a tear that escaped. "Because you see me, Sophia. All of me. The monster and the man. And you're still here." She closed her eyes, remembering the savage grace with which he'd moved during the fight, the cold calculation in his eyes as he eliminated threats. But she also remembered the gentle way he'd check her for injuries between shots, how his body had instinctively shielded her from danger. "I used to think I could separate myself from this world," she admitted. "But I'm just as much a part of it as you are now." His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. The familiar scent of his cologne, mixed with gunpowder, surrounded her. "You're the only one who's ever seen past the beast they call me. The only one who makes me want to be more than just a monster." Sophia opened her eyes, finding his face inches from hers. The warehouse lights cast shadows across his sharp features, highlighting the intensity in his gaze. "And what if that's not enough? What if this life consumes us both? Then we burn together." His voice was rough with emotion. "But I won't let you go, Sophia. Not again. Not ever." She reached up, tracing the scar along his jaw, a reminder of another battle, another time he'd fought to protect what was his. "I don't want you to." The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Dominic's grip tightened possessively on her waist, and when he spoke again, his words were soft but filled with fierce determination. "You're my world now. No one will ever take you from me." The mansion was quieter now, the echoes of violence finally fading from its halls. Sophia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in Dominic's study, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her reflection showed the fading bruises on her face, battle scars from their ordeal that would heal with time. Behind her, Dominic sat at his desk, his usual commanding presence subdued as he worked through the aftermath of the war they'd survived. Papers rustled as he sorted through them, his movements methodical but lacking their usual sharp precision. Sophia could see the weight of everything pressing down on his broad shoulders. "The Castellanos have surrendered completely," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Their territory is ours now." Sophia turned to face him, studying the man who had both terrified and captivated her. In the soft morning light, she could see beyond the harsh lines of his face, beyond the nickname they'd given him, the beast. There were new worry lines around his eyes, a vulnerability in the way he avoided her gaze. "And the others?" she asked softly. "Dead or scattered?" He set down the papers and finally looked at her. "No one will threaten what's mine again." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her, but something had changed. Sophia could see now what she'd missed before. The fear behind his control, the desperate need to protect what he loved. She crossed the room slowly, her bare feet silent on the expensive carpet. "You're exhausted, Dominic." His jaw clenched. "I'm fine." "No," she said, reaching out to touch his face. "You're not." He caught her wrist, but his grip was gentle. The contrast between this touch and the violence she'd witnessed from these same hands made her breath catch. His thumb traced circles on her pulse point, and she felt his walls beginning to crack. "I almost lost you," he admitted, the words seeming to tear from his throat. "When they had you." "But you didn't," Sophia reminded him. She stepped closer between his knees as he sat in his chair. "I'm here." His other hand came up to her waist, pulling her closer still. She could feel him trembling, the mighty Dominic Moretti finally allowing himself to feel the fear he'd pushed away during the fighting. "I've done things," he started, his voice rough. "Things that should make you run from me." Sophia ran her fingers through his dark hair, remembering the violence she'd witnessed, the cold efficiency with which he'd eliminated their enemies. But she also remembered how he'd held her afterward, how his hands had been so careful with her wounds. "I know who you are, Dominic," she said softly. "I've seen all of you now, the monster and the man." He looked up at her, his eyes dark with emotion. "And you're still here." "I'm still here." The morning light streamed through the windows, casting them both in gold. In this quiet moment, Sophia could see the truth of them both, how they'd been shaped by their world, scarred by it, but not broken. Dominic's arms tightened around her waist, his forehead pressing against her stomach as he finally allowed himself to truly feel everything they'd been through. Sophia held him, understanding flowing between them without words. She'd feared his darkness, fought against his control, but now she could see the love that drove him. It wasn't pretty or gentle. It was consuming, possessive, dangerous. But it was real, and it was hers. "They called me the Beast," he murmured against her. "But you make me want to be more than that." Sophia's heart ached at the raw honesty in his voice. She tilted his face up to hers, seeing the vulnerability he showed only to her. "You already are more than that, Dominic. You always have been." His eyes searched hers, looking for any trace of fear or doubt. Finding none, he pulled her closer, his touch reverent. Sophia melted into him, feeling the last of her reservations fade away. They were both products of their world, both scarred and dangerous in their own ways. But together, they were something else entirely, something stronger, something whole. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Dominic's study, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Sophia stood by the window, watching as his men patrolled the grounds below. The past few weeks had changed everything, the violence, the battles, the bloodshed. But most of all, it had changed them. Dominic sat behind his massive desk, his presence commanding even in silence. His dark eyes followed her every move, softer now when they looked at her, though no less intense. The bruises from their final confrontation with his enemies were fading, but the memories remained fresh. "Come here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Sophia turned from the window, her heart quickening as it always did when he called to her. She moved towards him, her heels clicking against the floor. The silk of her dress whispered with each step. "The Cavalli family signed the agreement this morning," he said, pulling her onto his lap. His touch was possessive but gentle, a contradiction that defined their relationship. "Everything we fought for, it's done." She traced the scar on his jaw, a fresh reminder of what they'd survived together. "And the others? They know their place now." His fingers tightened on her hip. "No one will dare challenge us again." Sophia leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent of expensive cologne and subtle danger. "I never thought I'd be here," she admitted. "Back when I was running from you in that alley, I was so sure you'd destroy me. A shadow crossed his face. I almost did. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her lower lip. You changed everything, Sophia. Made me see there was another way. She felt the truth of his words in the way he held her, in the gentleness that only she was allowed to witness. The beast was still there. She'd seen glimpses of him during negotiations, in the cold calculation of his business dealings. But now there was balance, control, purpose beyond mere violence. The other families respect you more for it, she said. They see strength in the changes you've made. Dominic's laugh was dark. They fear me more now than ever. A man with something to lose is more dangerous than one with nothing. His eyes locked with hers. And I have everything to lose. Sophia's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. She remembered their journey, the forced proximity, the resistance, the slow crumbling of walls between them. Each step had been a battle, each surrender a victory for them both. Show me the latest territory agreements, she said, reaching for the papers on his desk. This was her role now, not just lover, but partner. Her legal knowledge combined with his strategic mind made them unstoppable. Dominic spread the documents before her, his chest pressed against her back as they reviewed the terms together. His empire had grown, legitimized through her influence. Clean businesses alongside the necessary darkness of their world. Here, she pointed to a clause. We can strengthen this section, make it impossible for them to find loopholes. He pressed his lips to her neck, sending shivers down her spine. My brilliant Sophia, he murmured, always thinking 10 steps ahead. She turned in his arms, facing him fully. Someone has to keep you in check. His eyes darkened with desire and amusement. And you do it so well. His hand slid up her back, possessive and sure. Who would have thought the woman who hated me would become the one person I can't live without? Sophia saw the vulnerability beneath his words, the fear of loss that still haunted him. She had come to understand that his need to control, to possess, came from a place of deep love, twisted by his past but transformed by their connection. I'm here, she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. I chose this. I chose you. His grip tightened, and she felt his heart racing against her palm. The powerful Dominic Moretti, feared across continents, trembled at her touch. It was a heady feeling, knowing she held such power over him, just as he held power over her. This was their truth now, passion and danger, love and power, all wrapped together in an unbreakable bond. Sophia had found her place in his dark world, and she would fight beside him to protect it. Sophia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Dominic's penthouse office, watching the city lights twinkle below. The glass reflected her image, no longer the broken woman from that dark alley, but someone stronger, someone who had survived the storm and emerged victorious. Her bruises had faded, but the memories of everything they'd endured remained etched in her mind. Behind her, she heard Dominic's heavy footsteps approaching. His presence filled the room like a tangible force, but it no longer frightened her. Instead, it brought a sense of security she'd never thought possible. The Rossetti family signed the agreement, he said, his deep voice carrying across the room. They won't be a problem anymore. Sophia turned to face him, taking in his commanding presence. He'd loosened his tie, and his jacket was off, a rare moment of casual vulnerability he showed only around her. And the others? They know their place now. His jaw tightened. No one will dare touch what's mine again. The possessiveness in his voice made her heart race. 5 years ago, such words would have made her run. Now, they felt like a promise of protection, of belonging. Come here, he commanded softly, extending his hand. Sophia crossed the room, placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, pulling her closer until she was pressed against his chest. The familiar scent of his cologne wrapped around her like a comfort blanket. You're thinking too hard again, he murmured, his free hand coming up to cup her face. I'm thinking about how different everything is now, she admitted. A month ago, I was running from this world, from you. And now. His thumb traced her bottom lip, his eyes darkening with desire. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. The truth of her words surprised her, but they felt right. Even though I know what you are, what you do. Dominic's expression hardened for a moment. I told you before, Sophia. This is who I am. The violence, the power, it's part of me. I know. She reached up, running her fingers along his jaw. But it's not all of you. Not anymore. His eyes softened slightly, a change only she would notice. Because of you. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. You make me want to be better, even if I can never be good. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. I don't need you to be good, Dominic. I just need you to be mine. His grip tightened on her waist. I've always been yours, even when I pushed you away. Everything I've done, every life I've taken, every deal I've made, it was all to protect what's mine. To protect you. The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sophia understood now what she couldn't 5 years ago. That love could exist even in the darkest places, that it could transform without erasing the fundamental truth of who they were. We'll build something different, she said, her voice steady with conviction. Something stronger than before. Dominic pulled back slightly, his eyes searching her face. You're sure about this? About us? There's no going back, Sophia. Once you're truly mine, I'll never let you go again. Instead of fear, his words filled her with warmth. She reached up, threading her fingers through his hair. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward with you. His response was a deep, possessive kiss that made her knees weak. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were dark with promise. Then let's build our empire together. Sophia smiled, feeling the last of her doubts melt away. They weren't perfect, they never would be. Their love was forged in darkness, tempered by violence and pain. But it was real, and it was theirs. In Dominic's arms, she'd found not just safety, but belonging. A future that scared her once now felt like destiny. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Dominic's mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Sophia stood at the window, her fingers tracing patterns on the cool glass as she watched his men patrol the grounds below. The scene was so familiar now, the armed guards, the bulletproof vehicles, the constant vigilance. What once terrified her had become her normal. Behind her, she heard Dominic's measured footsteps approaching. He moved like a predator, silent and deadly, but she'd learned to sense his presence. Her body responded instinctively, warming at his proximity even before his arms wrapped around her waist. What's on your mind? His voice rumbled against her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Sophia leaned back against his chest, allowing herself to feel safe in the embrace of the most dangerous man she'd ever known. Everything that's changed, she admitted. Who we were 5 years ago, who we are now. Dominic's grip tightened slightly. Do you regret it? She turned in his arms, meeting his dark gaze. The brutality that had initially frightened her was still there, but now she saw beyond it, to the man who would burn the world down to keep her safe. No, she whispered. I don't regret any of it. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. The contrast never failed to amaze her, how those same hands that dealt death could touch her with such care. I wanted to hate you, Sophia continued, placing her hand over his heart. After you pushed me away 5 years ago, I tried so hard to forget you. And now, his voice was rough with emotion. Now I understand why you did it. But I'm stronger than you thought I was. I can handle your world, Dominic. I can handle you. He pressed his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. You're the only one who's ever seen all of me and stayed. Sophia closed her eyes, remembering the violence she'd witnessed, the darkness she'd chosen to accept. Because I see who you really are. The monster they fear, the man I love, they're both you, and I choose all of it. Dominic pulled back slightly, his eyes searching her face. I won't ever let you go again, he warned. If you're choosing this, choosing me, it's forever. I know. She smiled, tracing the scar on his jaw. The world you've built, the power you wield, it's part of who you are. I'm not running from it anymore. He led her to the leather couch, pulling her down beside him. The morning light caught the diamond ring on her finger, his mark of possession and protection combined into one glittering promise. "I'll give you everything," he vowed, his voice low and intense. "My empire, my protection, my life, it's all yours." Sophia curled into his side, feeling the solid strength of him. "I don't need an empire," she said softly. "I just need you. The real you, not the mask you show everyone else." His arms tightened around her. "You're the only one who gets to see that," he admitted. "The only one I trust enough to be vulnerable with." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Sophia thought about how far they'd come, from her bleeding in that alley to this moment of perfect understanding. The journey had been brutal, marked by violence and passion in equal measure, but it had led them here. "Promise me something," she said finally, tilting her head to meet his gaze. "Anything. Promise me that no matter how dark things get, you'll always come back to me." To this, Dominic's eyes softened, showing that rare vulnerability that belonged to her alone. He took her hand, pressing it against his heart. "I promise. You're my light, Sophia. My redemption. Everything I do, the violence, the power plays, all of it, it's to protect what we have." Sophia leaned up, pressing her lips to his in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened with the passion that always simmered between them. When they finally broke apart, she saw her own certainty reflected in his eyes. This was where she belonged, in the arms of a man who could destroy cities but chose to build an empire for her instead. Dominic stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, his silhouette stark against the setting sun. The golden light caught the crystal tumbler in his hand, sending fractals dancing across the mahogany walls. 5 years ago, he'd pushed Sophia away, believing love was a weakness he couldn't afford. Now, after everything they'd been through, he understood how wrong he'd been. The ice clinked against glass as he took another sip of whiskey. Behind him, the door opened quietly. He didn't need to turn to know it was Sophia. He could feel her presence, sense the way the air changed when she entered a room. His body had always been attuned to her, even during those long years apart. "You're brooding again," she said, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor as she approached. "Thinking," he corrected, still facing the window. The city sprawled before him, his empire, their empire now. Every building, every street held memories of their journey. The alley where he'd found her broken and bleeding, the warehouse where he'd killed to protect her, the safe house where she'd finally admitted she loved him despite his darkness. Sophia's hand slid around his waist, her touch warming him more than the whiskey ever could. "Share your thoughts with me," she murmured, pressing herself against his back. Dominic closed his eyes, letting himself feel the weight of her trust, her love. "I've spent my life building walls," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Keeping people out, making sure no one could get close enough to hurt me." He turned to face her, setting down his glass. "Then you came along and tore them all down." Sophia's eyes softened as she reached up to trace the scar on his jaw, a reminder of the battle that had nearly torn them apart. "Those walls were killing you, Dominic. You needed someone to show you there was more to life than power and control." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. The gesture was tender, at odds with the ruthless reputation he'd built. "I gave up control the moment I found you in that alley. Every decision since then has been about keeping you safe, keeping you close. And I chose to stay," Sophia reminded him, her free hand coming to rest over his heart. "Even after seeing the darkness in you, even after witnessing what you're capable of." Dominic's arms tightened around her, remembering the fear in her eyes when she'd watched him eliminate their enemies. "There were moments I thought I'd lose you," he admitted. "When the violence became too much, when my world threatened to destroy everything pure about you." Sophia shook her head, determination flashing in her eyes. "I'm stronger than you think. I always have been." Her fingers traced patterns on his chest, soothing the tension she found there. "Your darkness doesn't frighten me anymore. It's part of who you are, and I love all of you, the monster and the man." The words hit him like a physical blow. Dominic cupped her face in his hands, studying the woman who'd changed everything. She'd walked through fire with him, faced down his demons, and emerged stronger. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, feeling the softness of her skin. "Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The empire, the power, the responsibility. I need you to understand what that means." Sophia's eyes met his, unwavering. "I understand perfectly. We protect what's ours together." Her hand slid up his chest to rest on his shoulders. "You're not alone anymore, Dominic. You don't have to carry the weight of this world by yourself." The truth of her words settled into his bones. For so long, he believed love would make him weak, would leave him vulnerable. Instead, Sophia had become his strength, his anchor in a world of chaos and violence. She'd shown him that true power came not from fear, but from having something worth fighting for. Sophia watched Dominic from across his study, taking in how the morning light caught his sharp features. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back, surveying his empire below. The city sprawled before them, a kingdom built on blood and power, now transformed by their love into something more. "You're staring," he said without turning, a hint of amusement in his deep voice. "I'm admiring," Sophia corrected, moving to stand beside him. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, and she felt his energy shift as she drew near. Even now, after everything they'd been through, his presence still made her heart race. Dominic turned to face her, his dark eyes softening in that way reserved only for her. "And what exactly are you admiring?" "How different you are now," she said, reaching up to trace the scar along his jaw, a reminder of the battles they'd fought together. "How different we both are." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. The gesture was tender, contrasting sharply with the ruthlessness she knew he was capable of. "You changed everything, Sophia. You made me want to be better." "No," she shook her head. "I just helped you remember who you really are." The morning sun painted shadows across his face as he pulled her closer. His empire had grown stronger, not weaker, with the changes he'd made. The violence was still there. It had to be in their world, but now it had purpose, direction. Protection rather than destruction. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice low. "Choosing this life with me?" Sophia leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent. "Never. Even with all the darkness, all the danger, I'd choose you every time." His arms tightened around her. Below them, cars moved through the streets like toys. People went about their lives, unaware of the power that protected and controlled their city. The power that now flowed through both their veins. "I fought it for so long," Dominic admitted, his fingers trailing up her spine. "The way you made me feel, weak and strong at the same time. I thought love would destroy everything I'd built. And instead, it built something better." He turned her to face the window, standing behind her with his hands on her waist. "Look at what we've created together. An empire built on more than fear." Sophia watched their reflection in the glass. The lawyer who tried to escape this world, now standing proudly beside the man they called the Beast. But she saw beyond that name now, saw the man who had burned the world for her, who had learned to channel his darkness into protection rather than destruction. "Your enemies feared you before," she said, "but now they respect you. That's worth more than fear alone." His lips brushed her neck. "They respect us both. The woman who tamed the beast." Sophia laughed softly. "I never tamed you, Dominic. I just showed you there was more to life than survival." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their city wake up. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the floor of his study. Their study now. Everything that was his was hers, not because he gave it to her, but because she'd earned her place beside him. "Sometimes I still can't believe you chose to stay," he murmured against her hair. "After everything you saw, everything I did." Sophia turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "I chose to stay because of everything I saw, because you showed me all of yourself, the darkness and the light. That's what love is, Dominic. Accepting someone completely." His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheeks with a gentleness that would shock those who only knew him as the Beast. "You're the only one who's ever seen all of me. The only one I trust enough to let in. And you're the only one I trust enough to be myself with, she replied. The good and the bad, the strength and the weakness. We balance each other. The morning light wrapped around them like a blanket, casting their joined shadows across the floor. In that moment, they were more than a mafia boss and his lover. They were two halves of a whole, stronger together than apart. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.